Hi, and welcome to Beyond the Bottom Line. I am your host, MACPA CEO Rebekah Olson, and we're continuing our conversation here today around the responsible and the ethical use of AI in our profession. And I'm really excited to have someone that has been an MACPA partner for a very long time and trusted advisor to our profession. Nicole Graham. Nicole is an Aon risk advisor. She's also a lawyer with over 15 years of experience in professional liability. So, welcome, Nicole. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Rebecca. It's great to be here.
So, at MECPA meeting, internal, external board meetings, even some of our town halls, we like to ask the question to start with good news before we kind of dive into the subject matter. So, I'm curious, Nicole, what would be your good news today on this, pretty brisk fall morning?
So my good news right now is that my puppy Rocky, he's almost 6 months old. He
Oh,
completed his puppy training course and
uh,
he's very well. So I'm hoping he will not bark while we record this.
Always great, but we love that that's one of those things in COVID, we got to hear dogs and watch cats crawl across screens and stuff like that, that I personally, as an animal lover, love. So, congratulations to Rocky on graduating. Big deal, and to his mom, because I know that that took a lot of your time and effort as well. So, awesome. Well, on that note, let's dive in. Gosh, the world of AI and the responsible use and the ethical use of AI tools, especially within our profession, is constantly evolving, right? We don't have a lot of the standards. It's kind of this, influx kind of environment, but it seems to be baked in to all of our tools these days. And then there's external tools that they're always trying to sell us. What are you seeing in terms of your client base, the folks that you work with, your thought leadership, in terms of best practices around tools and in the use of AI?
So this is something I've been talking about with firms a lot for the last almost 3 years. And I will say that all the firms are just on different paths, right? So some of the larger firms are, building their own AI tools. Other firms are not interested in that level of investment yet and are sort of purchasing an out of the box AI tool that works with their tech stack. And
Mhm.
then others are still unsure how they want to handle it. So when I speak with firms, it's more like a what do you have in place right now? What are you doing? What are you thinking? Where do you want to go with it? And the answer is always different based on the firm I'm speaking to.
Yeah, definitely. Do you do you see something in your firms that seem to get it, seem to have more structure around it or strategy around it, um, that are farther along in it, that's unique, something that's common, or some sort of even like a cultural thing that you see those firms really succeeding?
So, this industry is, I would say, fairly tech advanced when you put it against other industries. I mean, coming from a law practice, I will say CPAs adjust to new technology faster than lawyers do, which I think is really cool and exciting. So people, at GPT burst on the scene and people are like, how can I optimize this? And right away there was an interest and it was just like, all right, you know what? I'm gonna take the free chat GPT on my phone, I'm gonna play around with it, see what its capabilities are. And then after that, it was like, "All right, how can we take this tool and use it to ease some of our firm pain points?" And that's really just honestly, it was just a lot of playing around with it, and then it was like,
Mm.
"Okay, here's what we wanna do, so now we're gonna invest in a tool or create a tool that can work for us," which is just really exciting and fun. And then, there are other firms that are like, "I don't know about that." So, that's it's just it's very different depending on who you talk to, but I do
Yeah.
think that firms that are embracing it are on the right path. I don't think that this is a technology you can just ignore. I
Mm.
think it's something that is going to continue to grow. And you're going to need it for your business, sort of whether you like it or not. And it has been around for almost 3 years. So when you think about hiring, young CPAs, young professionals, they've been using it. They used it in college to help them study and learn, and now they're gonna use it in their professional life. So, really, you wanna be able to provide them an atmosphere where they can embrace that.
I love that you pointed out that the profession is one that adopts and responds kind of timely to technology. I don't know that we always get that reputation. So that made my heart very happy, I will say, because I think there has been times where maybe we've lagged, but I do see and I have seen that progression of firms being and CPA leaders being more innovative. And I love the approach that you said of those that are starting to experiment, or maybe even if they're farther along, where they started was more that playing around and the internal kind of things rather than the using it on external client things, right? Like where how can you get experience? How can you experiment with less risk in terms of internal? Is that have you seen that be successful and then that builds that skill set to then take externally?
For sure, and to sort of give you an example of, like, how this is being done, like, there's a firm that literally has a contest, and I
Mm.
forget if it's weekly or monthly, but you submit the way you used the technology, and, there's a little committee that reviews them all, and then they announce, like, the results, "Okay, here are the top 3 uses we had this week," and this is, like, great, right? Because you have a bunch of people who are experimenting, and then you're cascading the really good ideas to all your people so that other people can adopt it too. Because there might be someone who was like, wow, I never thought of that, but that would actually be really helpful for what I'm doing and this project I'm working on. And then they adopt it. So it's like a really neat and fun thing. Um, but with fun, there's always a little risk. So we can talk about that in a minute. But it is a fun tool to play around with, and I think that's the best way to honestly get started with it is to just start using it. When ChatGPT came out, I had to start using it just so I could talk to firms about it, and
Mm.
it was fun and it was interesting, and I
Yeah.
tried it for a bunch of different things to see like how it would work.
Right. Yeah. I love that idea of like a monthly contest, right? Because not only then are you encouraging the experimentation, right? Encouraging innovation, even just encouraging the thought of how could I do something better, whether that's through an AI tool or just like process, right? Like just thinking through, we've always done it this way. What's a better way to do it? And I think that also really, as you mentioned, the young people coming into the profession, I think that gives them some energy and excitement about things that they can work on and really speak into that can have an impact right away, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we talked about the internal and the less risky things, the process automation, maybe some of the writing skills and things like that. But given the sensitive nature of a lot of what, our profession deals with, especially when you talk about clients and client and financial data, what best practices have you seen around, making sure that the tools that, our teams are using are secure, are compliant? What should folks be looking out for when they're doing that due diligence on the tools?
Yeah, so this is a question I get a lot because people are like a little overwhelmed. There are so many different tools out on the market, and it's like, what should I use? What should I do? Um, and what am I looking for? And you have to remember that these service agreements, these contracts with these companies, you would negotiate them as you would any other one. You want to do the same due diligence you would any third party provider. So you want to ask certain questions like privacy is a huge issue, as you said. There's data privacy concerns. You have a lot of sensitive data on your clients, and you want to keep it secure because you have a duty to. And um, So one thing you can talk about is, okay, well, if I input information into this tool, where does it go? Who can see? Does it go outside my organization? Is there a de-identification process so that someone cannot see and link up sensitive data to, the individual? Uh, these are questions you're going to want to ask when you're sort of going through that, because a lot of them have guardrails in place so that the information remains protected and it is not being really shared outside of your organization. So that's very, very, very important when you're speaking with providers. But, you want to also ask them other questions. Like, a big concern with AI tools is, avoiding bias, because, any outputs by the tool are still subject to your firm's, like, anti-discrimination and fair treatment policies. So you want to make sure that you understand how the providers are trying to avoid bias and how they're auditing for that and adjusting for that. So that's something you want to talk to them about, before you spend the money to purchase or license a tool. Another issue that we really want to stress is, to the extent possible, try to negotiate some risk transfer. So you want to make sure that if there is some sort of failure on their end, that they were going to be responsible for it. Now, there's a human review piece where you have to review it for accuracy and relevancy. Um, but, you want to make sure that any other errors that are on their end that are just, um, you know, uh, cause consequence for you. Like, for example, there's somehow a breach or a failure and sensitive information does get leaked, that they are going to indemnify you for that, that they are going to protect you for that, that they are insured for that. So you want to make sure
Right.
that they have sort of like a cyber liability insurance or any other applicable coverages to deal with that. So those are some of the things you really need to think about, and negotiate when you're walking through that process.
Absolutely. Yeah. The idea of you're still responsible for the output, right?
Right.
Of these tools. It's not like, well, that's what it said, and so, like that doesn't fly, right? You're that oversight, that professional skepticism, that review is still real embedded into our profession, and so this isn't an outsourced thing. You can't outsource your responsibility over the results of this. So making sure you have those things in place is a really, really great advice. When it comes to just policies, in general, right? Because there might be very specific policies or use cases for different tools. But in terms of just a general, how our firm interacts with Gen AI, what are some things that you're seeing firms do to, one, make sure that their teams are using the right firm sponsored tools, right? When we had a conversation earlier, and you said, on Instagram I'm being, advertised for a tool that can record my meetings and take meeting notes for me. Like, okay, well, maybe that's not the place to, like, gather your work tools, right? But when we have team members that have access to their phones at work, and most of the time have some sort of hybrid environment where they're working from home as well, what kind of guardrails, or at least um, structures, frameworks can you put in place to help your team know when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate?
Okay, so I think
It's a
that
lot.
the biggest, like, thing you can take away is that this is a new technology and people are going to use it. So you're going to have your policies and procedures in place, because you want to create good habits now. You don't want to correct mistakes later. You want everyone to start with good habits. That is the best way to adopt the technology, the most risk averse way to adopt the technology. So you really want to consider privacy, transparency, avoiding bias, human review, and limiting your use cases, right? Those are sort of the big anchoring ideas when you're thinking about your policies and procedures. But it is paramount that people understand that they are to use the firm approved tools and, to the extent possible, on firm provided devices. And I know for some firms that's not always possible. People have personal devices they use, like their phones and things like that. But to the extent possible, I would try to limit it to, well, definitely limit it to firm approved tools, and then to the extent you can to firm approved or firm issued devices. Um, I will say for firms that are like, well, we don't, it's not in the budget for this year, but we do want to sort of start allowing our people to play with the technology. So we're just going to use like the free chat GPT. Okay. In that case, though, you're going to have to really step up your game in terms of your policies and procedures, and understand the limitations of the free chat GPT. I don't know. I'm not sure if it is sort of caught up to where it is current in all of its information.
Right.
Uh, so you're going to need to definitely keep the human review piece very focused, but also the privacy. Don't want um, private data being entered into the tool. But if you
Right.
have sort of your enterprise account and you have some of those privacy guardrails in place, you still want to be able to explain to people what they can enter into it, what they cannot enter into it. Provide specific examples of ways to enter information, ways that are prohibited. Um, I mean, that's really the best way, is to just explain it, show them this is the right way, this is the
Mhm.
wrong way. It's really just setting out your policies, teaching your people your policies, and then also having some oversight. You want to be able to go back and see how everyone is using the tool to make sure that they're following the rules. And again, this is just to foster these good habits from the start.
Right. I love that you said something and it sounds so simple, but I think it doesn't always get done. It's like you can't come up with this great policy, but did you really teach your people the policy, right? Or did
Right.
you send it in an email and say, everybody read this and agree to it, and then it got put on a shelf? Like this is one of those things with the nuances and probably a policy that might be fluid, might change more frequently than, the our vacation policy or our dress code policy or things like that, right? It is something that we have to constantly update and constantly teach in a way that I think is different from others potentially.
I agree, because if you think about it, one, the profession is changing at a fairly rapid pace, but also the technology continues to evolve and regulations are evolving. So there's not a ton of
Right.
regulation right now that directly addresses this type of technology, but there may be, and
It's
you need
coming.
to
Yeah.
right, so you need to keep abreast of that. Like, right now, there are some states that require you to advise someone when they are speaking to a chatbot. So if you're using the AI to have a chatbot that interfaces with your clients, depending on where that client is, you may need, that may require legal disclosure. So that's something you're going to need to know sort of before you launch a chatbot. So it's a good idea to have someone either internally at the firm who is charged with sort of staying on top of any regulatory changes, or just seeking outside counsel to sort of learn the legal landscape on it.
Yeah, and it's so difficult because, the standards, the regulations, the tools all evolving, and in our, structure in the US, right? Is it a state law? Is it federal? Is it a standards kind of setting body that's going to have this? Like all of these different components. I think you're right. Having that person that kind of is tasked with that, and maybe it's your quality management person, maybe it's someone in the tech side, maybe it's a team of people,
Right.
depending on how deep you're going to go into this is really necessary. Who's the owner? Because if we're all the owners, then nobody's really the owner, right?
Right.
And having that, I think, is a great piece of advice.
And
So.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, just one more thing, and making
Yeah.
sure that your people know who to go to is so
Mm.
key, right? You can write your policies, you can tell them these things, but if they don't have questions and they don't know who to go to, it makes it harder. So having sort of
Yeah.
a clear sort of reporting chain on, "Hey, I wanna use it this way, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to. Who do I go to?" Make sure that they have that or, you know, it's just someone or a committee that they can go to discuss these things is really gonna be helpful down the line because, like you said, this isn't a static exercises. This is all changing pretty quickly, so things are gonna need to evolve over time. So you wanna make sure that there's always someone running point and answering questions.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to touch on culture just for a second because I think certainly there's policies, there's structures you can set up within the firm and teams and things like that. But what is what does it look like in our profession that is so based on trust? Trust is in some ways what we sell, expertise and trust. What does that? How does that look? Inside an organization? Is there any like best practices or cultural things? I know the innovative little monthly competitions certainly speak to that culture thing, but have you seen anything else people have done to make sure that the culture that surrounds the people really enables them to use it well and use it safely?
Right, so that's where I think rigorous oversight comes in, again,
Mm,
because this is new. And it's like the shiny new toy everyone wants to play, and you wanna make sure that when they're using it properly, and rigorous oversight really helps with that. So, having having someone who can review the prompts to make sure that they're being done correctly, to make sure that the tools are not being used for, use cases that have been deemed too risky by the firm. um, you want someone to be able to go back and look in a file to find the
mm,
human review element, right? You want to make sure that someone actually went and checked the output for accuracy, that, the output, you know, was within ethical guidelines. You know,
mm.
I always say that this technology isn't a replacement for the CPA.
Right.
You are still being hired for your expertise, for your, professional judgment. So that has
Hmm.
to shine through because otherwise, why are you being hired? They could use the tool on their own. The client could use it on their own. So you want to make sure that your people are still showing their professional judgment, their expertise. Why you, right? Why are they hiring you? So having someone review all of that, review the prompts, make sure that they're accurate, or to make sure that they're not violating any policies is really key. Um, I think it's the way to create the best habits. If everyone's told to do something, but there's really no follow up and no checkup, then that's when people can start to slip. And that's when I always say my biggest worry about this is the over reliance on the tech because it's so
Mm.
easy, right?
Right.
You have this technology, you're like, well, someone way smarter than I did, like put this together. So obviously they're going to know more than I do. And so you can see how you can like easily come to rely on it. And the technology can confidently give you a wrong response. It sounds really great, but it's just totally wrong. So you can see how that happens. Also, you can see like a situation where it's like, well, I've checked it the 10 other times I did it and it was always correct. And now I'm busy and I don't have time. So I'm just going to use it. And then that's the time that the tool gets it wrong. And that's when end up in a claim. So
Right.
you want to make sure that someone is checking to make sure that everyone's using it appropriately again to foster these good habits.
Yeah. Those healthy habits are such a key and simple concept, but I think that that's really true. We it it's like any other thing we do, like, it takes that practice and having that structure and following it even when you're like, "Okay, it's been right the 10 times," or whatever that is, and we think of our profession, and you talked about just the review component, right? That's baked into everything that we do. There's oversight and review in our work, right? But also documentation. You mentioned that too, and I think that is important too, and I think sometimes I worry that that gets lost, right? Because it's like, you're just answering this question, you're gonna document your answer to it, but did you document did you how you got there, right? It's like in school when the teacher said, "Show your work."
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
It's like, okay, well, we might review the final result, but, did we review the how you got there part, and is there something in that that could be, have contain some bias or kind of skew results or things like that? Makes a lot of sense. Like, some of this is use the structure and the policies and the way we do our work now with
Yep.
documenting and reviewing and professional skepticism and judgment, but with this new tool as well.
Right. None of that goes away just because you have new tech. Like, this is
Right.
no different than any other tool that you use to help
Absolutely.
provide, quality services to your clients. So you treat it as you would any other. Don't give it any great deference because it's this like fancy and new technology.
Right. Absolutely. I even when you got the bank statements or when I did, the bank rec, I still had to foot, the things manually, right? I didn't
Right.
just every time that was one of the procedures. I have to, yes, I know this says this and this adds up in Excel, but professionally, I had to check that again. So that review is definitely a huge part of it. Like, we have these systems in place already. So I kind of want to wrap up with just a couple things around transparency and disclosure when we're talking about clients and client facing externally, right? So our profession is adopting this pretty fast. It's getting baked into tools that we already use, right? So it's kind of there whether we necessarily asked for it or not in some of those cases. But then we're bringing in those other tools or building them internally. From your perspective, what are best practices on transparency and disclosure in terms of your clients, right? Because the profession is built on trust. And so what does that look like? Engagement letters, things like that.
So, as I mentioned before, there's not a ton of regulation on it yet to know if it's legally required. And so you should definitely consult with, an attorney or legal counsel to determine any uses that may require disclosure. But even if it's not required,
Right.
it's a good idea to disclose the use of, your tools to your client. Mostly because it's new technology. I don't think a lot of clients would flinch at it, um, or at least no one has reported back that they disclosed this to clients, and clients were like, "Oh, you can't use that. I want you using that for my services." Um, so I haven't heard that, but I do think you should, be open about it, disclose it to the client, let the client decide if that's something that they are comfortable with. And then, I think it's easy to put into an engagement letter. A lot of like the template engagement letters for that are given to the AICPA insurance program members have a third party vendor provision in there disclosing, hey, we use third
Me-
party vendors. And so this is really no different. It's only a little slightly different than, your typical vendors, but
Right.
having it right baked into your engagement letter that, they understand that you may be using it, that they consent to the use of it, and that, have leave it at that. And if you do have any clients that have questions, you can just talk to them. What are their concerns?
Right.
Maybe you just talk to them a little further and explain to them how you've been using it or how the data is kept by the tool or, that the data isn't shared beyond your organization. Something like that that might assuage any concerns they have. And then they might be happy to have it. Because at the end of the day, the reason you're using it is for providing, quality and efficiency in your services. So if you're telling someone, well, this can help us do it more efficiently and quicker for you, they might be like, "Oh, well, that's great, and the risk is low, so I'm okay with it." You
Mhm.
might have to have a conversation, but, it's worth it, I think.
Yeah, definitely, and it's that balance between the efficiency and the quality, right?
Mhm.
And I've heard, it could be it can go either way, right? But, for clients, and then we could go into a whole conversation around pricing. If you're gonna say, "I can do this a lot faster for you," then they're gonna say, "Well, why is my cost this?" We won't go there today, but, just an interesting dynamic and just how, disruptive, but in a great way, some of this technology really can be. So I'll end with some good news. We started with some good news. So Nicole, when you see the landscape and it's ever changing and it's complex, but what would you say is the good news, the bottom line good news for leaders that are really navigating this AI and really using it ethically, responsibly, and of course avoiding risk?
So, the one really good thing for this profession is that there are so many different tools out there that
Mm,
are specific to this profession, and they are specific to tax or audit. Like, you can go onto the marketplace and find a lot of different tools that could be very useful for your specific work. And it's just going out and finding the right one. Um, Really great place to start if you're like, where do I even find this information? CPA.com had an AI white paper that was issued. It was probably issued about a year ago, but there was a bunch of providers listed in that.
mhm.
It's a good place to start looking. And then beyond that, you can find lots of information about all of these different providers and just the different ways that they use the technology. It's really like impressive. So
Yeah. Yeah,
it's
that is great news that we have this technology, built for and by the profession, right?
yeah.
We're not trying to adapt something that, they don't get us, and then we're trying to adapt it to our business model. These technologies,
Exactly.
in a lot of ways, are built for the profession, which is certainly very helpful when we have these conversations. Wow.
For sure.
And then lastly, I mentioned, where can we get some tools? I know Aon puts out great white papers and things like that as well. Um, Direct our folks, it's cpai.com, is that correct?
Yes, if you go to cpai.com, you can use the little search bar to put in generative AI, and all of our different resources and articles will pop up, and it's pretty easy to find. So go take a look. And like I
Yeah,
said, the CPA.com white paper, and I believe the AI CPA had a generative AI toolkit, or maybe it was.
they do, yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah, those are
lots of
really great.
resources.
They're really great resources, especially if you're sort of just trying to figure out how you wanna start your AI journey.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us, Nicole. I'll look
Thanks.
forward to seeing you at our next event or when I come and visit Aon's offices. Great to see you.
Good to see you as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye bye.